Greetings from Father Ian. I was with him yesterday. We got together. And he wanted me to relate to you. He's done that personally, those who have come to see him, and he really appreciates all those who have come out to visit him. And you're always welcome at St. Helens, where he is in Hebron. But for those who have not had that opportunity to see him, he wants me to thank you once again for your prayers. Back in October, he told me it was 3 years that marked the anniversary of his cancer diagnosis. And you might remember he was given only 1 year at the most to live, and now he is well past 3. So he attributes that, and I believe that too, that he's still here and still healthy enough to have Mass and confession and help there as a priest, to prayer in a special way, to your prayers. So a sincere thanks for those prayers on his behalf, and also from me personally, being a good friend of his, and just an encouragement. It's been a long time, but please continue, persevere in those prayers. So, of course, Lent is all about prayer, and not just prayer once in a while, here and there, when we think of it, when we need something, but persevering prayer, praying always. I can't really put myself in his place, but I can only imagine someone like Father Ian with stage 4 cancer. Your life situation, your illness, your challenges keep you praying a lot. We're not all aware of challenges like that. We don't have challenges like that, all of us, in our lives. But just as that prayer is necessary for someone in that situation, it's necessary for you and for me. So yesterday when I was with him, one of the memories that popped into my mind was one of the many trips we made. So in addition to being friends with Father Ian for a very long time, and having gone to school, graduate school with him for 4 years, there's some other things we have in common, and one of the other things we have in common is we both have a brother named Michael, or Mike. And both of our brothers with that name live around close to the city of Boston in Massachusetts. So I was thinking about that visit when we drove out together. He went to visit his brother Mike, I went to visit my brother Mike. It wasn't back then, actually. It was one of my more recent visits that my brother and his family, his wife and their children and myself, went to a place that we go almost every time I go out there to visit, and they go often because it's not far away from where they live. The place is called Walden. So if that name sounds familiar, it's because there was a famous American writer, Henry David Thoreau. And Thoreau, of all the places he traveled, and he traveled many different places, there was something not only special, but something sacred about Walden. So Walden now is a park, and much like then, it's wooded, and there's this beautiful lake there, and it reminds me a lot when I'm there of the lakes here in and around La Porte and the woods around them. But in any case, for Thoreau, that was a place that he encountered peace. It was a serenity that he had on that spot, so much so that he decided to actually live there. He had a house built for himself, a very small house. It's no longer there, but the outlines of where it was are still marked. And he lived there to commune with nature and to have that peace that he so longed for, and that he strove to communicate and to give as best as he could through his writings. So it's interesting about that, not only that we go there each time I go out to visit. We usually go out there about once a year. But now they have a visitor center for Walden. It's a very famous place, and it's a very well-traveled park. Lots of people go there all the time. So in the visitor center, they have this interesting exhibit. I think it's still there. This is a couple of years ago. But the exhibit is entitled, "Where is Your Walden?" So it shares in that place some of the writings about Walden that David Thoreau wrote many years ago. And the idea is, on this computer, you can go anywhere in the world and mark your Walden, your sacred space where you encounter serenity. And that's something that you take with you. You, of course, just mark it on the computer, but then that appears on the map, so you see all the places that people have marked. And many places, there are many people marked that, but some have only one. And there's places it looks like, I didn't really take too much time with that map, but it looks like there's places throughout the world that people call their Walden. I did it too. I chose a place in Upper Peninsula of Michigan, far, far away. But I noticed after I did that, my brother, and he's done this before, but each time he goes there, instead of choosing a different place, he always chooses the same place. So as we were driving back home to his home, I asked him about that because I thought it was interesting. He didn't choose a place that was far away. He chose his home. Not far from Walden is the town where he lives, near Boston, Arlington, Massachusetts. And that's where he put his mark, where he finds his peace, his serenity. And I asked him about that. I was just a little surprised. Why did you put it there? I suppose my brother's traveled many places throughout the world too. And he said, well, it's my life, it's my family. That's where I find my peace. That's what's so important to me. Not going, I like to visit other places, he said, but there's no place as important to me as my home, because my family's there, because we live there. And I thought to myself, if we went back, which we did later, but in subsequent years we didn't stop by the visitor's center. I probably will one of these times, because I keep thinking about it. And if that exhibit is still there, I'm going to change my answer, and my answer will be La Porte. This is where I live. This is where you, my family, are. This is where God has called me to be. So Peter, in the gospel, what he wants to do, understandably, like I was thinking about doing when I was there in Walden, thinking of a place that's special, that's far, far away, that's out of the ordinary, that you don't go very often, or maybe you've never been. Probably some people marked some places on that map that they have on their bucket list. They've never actually traveled there, but that's their dream to visit at least once in their life. I don't know. I didn't ask anyone why they put their place where they did outside of my brother. But I really believe my brother was right, and he's been there a number of times, being close, and maybe he's thought that and changed his answer. I didn't ask, he didn't say. But Peter wants to extend. He wants to make always experience this extraordinary vision that he had of Jesus that revealed to him and James and John who Jesus really is. He's told them, but now he's shown them. And so Peter, they're coming down the mountain. He doesn't want to come down the mountain. He wanted to stay there, and we see that in the gospel. That's why he wanted to make tents for Jesus and Moses and Elijah who appeared with Jesus. He wanted to stay there. He wanted that experience to stay forever. He hadn't learned, as I am still learning, that what is really extraordinary, what is really important, or should be to us, is not a far, far place away. It's not an extraordinary experience that we've had, although those form us, but our everyday life. One of the saints once said, probably many of them said, if you don't find Jesus every day in your home, with your family, in your ordinary work, in your school, doing what you do, you're never going to find him. You're not going to find him someplace far away. You're not going to find him when you're doing special, extraordinary things. You might find him in those places, but if you don't find him here, where you live, every day in your life, you're never going to find him. And so it's interesting that Peter tries to make a tent, because in the gospel, in John's gospel, at the beginning, we are told that Jesus became flesh. Another way that that's translated, what that also means, is that he pitched his tent among us. So in other words, Jesus, who is God, who is all-powerful, knows all things, instead of staying within that glory, he became one of us. And he not only became one of us for a moment, but he lived his life here. For 30 years, there are 33 years in his life, but for 30 of his years, he lived an ordinary life. We don't know of anything extraordinary that Jesus did during those first 30 years, and we know that his first miracle in his ministry was when he made water wine at Cana. And that was when he began his ministry at 30 years old. What was he doing? All of those years of his life, the vast majority of his life, was spent doing ordinary things. He was working, along with St. Joseph, his father, in the carpenter's shop. He lived with Joseph and our mother Mary. And one of the saints said what she found so helpful and so moving and so important about the Holy Family, and she would think of them often, is that they are so very ordinary. So ordinary that they said to Jesus, "Is he not the carpenter's son? And can anything good come from Nazareth?" Nazareth was as ordinary as it could be. It was nothing special, nothing important. But for Jesus and Mary and Joseph, it was Walden, to use Thoreau's word. It was the sacred place, that is, when Jesus lived there. And then when he went out and taught and preached and worked his miracles, it was wherever he was. The disciples wanted him to stay again and again. "Stay here, the people want to see you." And Jesus said, "No, we have to continue to go to all the towns to preach the word." Jesus did not stay in one place. But wherever he was, that was a sacred place, not only because he is God, but in his humanity, he wanted to teach you and me that what is extraordinary is the ordinary. And the most extraordinary thing, and we hear that word today, that we also heard in the Christmas season, the last day of the Christmas season, the baptism of Jesus, the Father says to Jesus, "You are my beloved Son," but it's a little bit different here at the Transfiguration. The Father says, instead of "You are my beloved Son," he says, "This is my beloved Son." And then, unlike the baptism, he says something else, and this is to you and to me. Listen up. What does the Father say to you, to me? "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." In other words, pay attention, focus where you are, what you're doing, your family, your co-workers, your friends, your school, what you do each and every day. Our task during Lent and our work during life is to make that environment holy, your home holy, your workplace holy, your neighborhood holy, your school holy, wherever you are. Holy means to be like God, to make people realize that God is there. Certainly God is here. He is fully present in the Blessed Sacrament, in this church. But we don't stay here all day. We don't pitch our tent here, but we go and we say, the Mass is ended, go in peace. That peace that you receive here, don't keep it to yourself. Let that peace shine. Share that peace. Let that serenity, let that joy that we know, if our hearts are open to it, when we hear Jesus speaking to us in the Bible, when we receive Jesus in the Holy Eucharist, we understand better than any other time, any other moment in our life, that we are beloved. But again, it starts here, and it's to continue out there. I learned a lesson a few years ago from my brother, a very important lesson, and it's really not different from the lesson that Jesus teaches us today. Don't look to a place far, far away. Don't think only when you're doing extraordinary things, but think every day, think every moment of every day, that you are beloved. Remember that. You are loved, and if you know that, and if you believe that, that changes everything. Jesus knew that he was loved, and that is why he was able to do what he did for you and for me, and that is why he does what he does for you and for me right now, that he gives us his life. Let's pray that we may never, ever forget that we are beloved sons and daughters of God, that he gave his life for us on the cross, that he gives that life to you and to me every time we come and hear his word, and especially when we receive Holy Communion. And let's pray that we never keep this joy, this love to ourselves, but let that love of the Lord shine. Jesus was transfigured with the light of God's love. Let your life be light. Let it be the light of God's love as well. every day, doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. And if you do that, not only will you bring God's light into the world, but you will cast out that darkness in your life and in our world and help people to know that they don't have to go anywhere else. All they have to do is remember that God is with them always, because they too are beloved.